The attack. It was a quiet day in the vastness of space, the kind of day that seemed endless and peaceful. The Atheris, a human hospital ship, floated silently through the stars, a shining beacon of hope. This ship, built with the best Earth technology, was on a mission to provide medical care to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. Its crew, made up of doctors, nurses, and medical staff, moved calmly through the ship, treating patients from many different alien races. The ship's bright white hull gleamed as it passed through uncharted space, bringing relief to those in need. On board the Atheris, the crew was used to long days of healing and working in the quiet of space. But they never expected the peace to be broken. Without warning, the ship's sensors started beeping wildly. The crew froze. Something was wrong. A loud alarm blared across the ship, cutting through the peaceful atmosphere. Red lights flashed in every hallway, and the ship shook violently. The crew scrambled to their posts, trying to understand what was happening. On the bridge, Captain Clara Winters barked out orders, her voice calm but tense. "Status report," she shouted, her hands gripping the console in front of her. "We're under attack, Captain," Lieutenant James Ross replied, his face pale as he looked at the screens. "It's coming from outside the ship. We've been hit." A massive explosion rocked the Atheris, sending the ship tilting violently to one side. The ship's systems began to fail. Lights flickered, and the medical bays were thrown into chaos. The walls shook, and the sound of metal groaning under pressure filled the ship. "Get to the escape pods," Captain Winters ordered, but her voice was lost in the confusion. The hospital ship, once a symbol of peace and healing, was now a battlefield. The crew fought desperately to control the situation. Doctors and nurses rushed to the injured patients, trying to stabilize them as best they could. The ship's hospital bays were flooded with casualties, and many were too badly hurt to save. As the ship lurched and spun through space, the attackers continued their assault, hitting the Atheris again and again. "Who are they?" one of the crew members gasped, barely able to speak over the sound of explosions. "We don't know," Lieutenant Ross replied, his voice tight with fear. "But they're relentless, and we're not equipped for this kind of fight." Despite their best efforts, the ship's defenses were no match for the enemy's weapons. The attackers' ships, sleek and deadly, moved quickly around the Atheris, dodging the hospital ship's feeble attempts at retaliation. The enemy had come with one goal in mind: to destroy Earth's symbol of peace. They hit vital systems, causing more fires, more damage. The Atheris was losing power fast. Captain Winters watched helplessly as the situation worsened. She knew they couldn't hold on much longer. Her team, her medical staff, had never trained for combat. They were here to heal, to help, not to fight. But now, Earth's enemies had turned their weapons on them. The attackers were fast and efficient. Their ships appeared and disappeared like shadows, leaving no time for the crew to react. It was clear that this was no random act of violence. Someone had planned this. The Atheris had been targeted on purpose, a symbol of everything Earth stood for. And now, that symbol was being torn apart in space, surrounded by the stars. As the attack continued, Captain Winters made a decision. They had to send a distress signal. The Atheris had to reach Earth's fleet, and quickly. She knew the attackers would not stop until they had destroyed the ship completely. "Send the distress signal," she shouted to the communications officer. Now. The officer scrambled to comply, but the ship's systems were failing rapidly. Sparks flew from the control panels, and the ship's lights flickered in and out. The message would have to get through. If it didn't, Earth's response would be too late. Outside the Atheris, the attackers launched another round of missiles, hitting the hospital ship's engine room. The ship shuddered as the engines began to fail completely. It was only a matter of time before the Atheris would be lost forever. In the quiet of space, the attackers had accomplished their goal. They had sent a message to Earth. Earth's peaceful ways would not protect them. The galaxy was no longer a place of diplomacy. It was a place of power. And whoever had attacked the Aetheris had made one thing clear. They were not afraid of Earth. They would not be deterred by Earth's peaceful reputation. But what the attackers didn't know was that Earth had something they didn't expect. The peaceful hospital ships were part of Earth's greater force, a force that would not stand down. And while the Aetheris was on the brink of destruction, it was only the beginning. The attackers had awoken something within Earth, a fury that would soon turn the tables. They had made a mistake by attacking the hospital ship, and the consequences of that mistake would be felt across the stars. The battle for Earth's honor had just begun. The damage was severe. The Aetheris had taken hit after hit, and the once pristine hospital ship now drifted like a wounded beast in the cold void of space. The bright white lights that once filled the halls flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The crew, though shaken, continued to do what they could. Doctors worked frantically, trying to save the wounded, while engineers struggled to restore power to the failing systems. But everyone knew deep down that the ship's survival was uncertain. The attackers had done their damage, and they had done it well. Captain Clara Winters stood on the bridge, staring out at the vast emptiness of space. Her mind raced. How could this happen? Who were they? And why had they targeted a hospital ship? The peaceful mission of the Aetheris had been reduced to ashes, and with it, a symbol of Earth's goodwill in the galaxy. Her eyes narrowed as the thought crossed her mind. What if this wasn't just an attack? What if it was a message? The Aetheris had been sent to help, not to fight. But now, in the face of destruction, something inside Captain Winters shifted. The peaceful mission of Earth had been shattered, and it was clear now that Earth was no longer seen as a force to be respected. This was a challenge Earth would not ignore. Captain Winters, a voice called from behind her. Lieutenant Ross entered, his face grim. His uniform was covered in dust and blood, but his eyes were burning with a new fire. We've sent out the distress signal. Earth's fleet should have received it by now. Good, Captain Winters replied, her voice cold. They need to get here fast. We need to fight back, Lieutenant Ross added, his voice tinged with anger. We can't just sit here and wait for help. If we do, they'll finish us off. We need to show them we're not just some helpless target. Captain Winters turned to face him. The fire in his eyes matched the rage she felt inside. They had attacked the Aetheris, a symbol of Earth's compassion, and in doing so, they had awoken something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. The anger of humanity. We don't have the weapons to fight them, Captain Winters said quietly. The Aetheris was never meant for combat, but we do have something they don't expect. We have something they've never seen before. Ross looked confused for a moment before the realization hit him. You mean Earth's war fleet? Captain Winters nodded, her expression hardening. Yes, they thought they could destroy us. But they've made a grave mistake. Earth may have been peaceful, but it has always had the strength to defend itself when pushed to the edge. She turned toward the view screen on the bridge, staring at the stars. I'm not waiting any longer. The fleet needs to know what happened here. And when they arrive, we'll make sure the galaxy knows that Earth will no longer be a victim. Ross's face lit up with determination. Do you think the fleet will come in time? We have to make sure they do, Winters said. We can't afford to wait. She turned to the communications officer, who had been monitoring the distress signal. Have we heard anything back from Earth? The officer shook his head, frustration visible on his face. Nothing yet, Captain. The message is out, but we're still too far from Earth for a fast response. Winters took a deep breath, her mind calculating their next move. They were sitting ducks in the middle of space, vulnerable to another attack. The Aetheris defenses were barely operational, and their shields were nearly depleted. The enemy could strike again at any moment. But then, Winters had an idea. The Aetheris might not have the power to fight back on its own, but Earth's military power was another story. They had a secret weapon. Earth's war fleet was the most advanced in the galaxy, but the galaxy had no idea how terrifying it could be. She looked back at Lieutenant Ross. "We need to make sure we can communicate with Earth's fleet. The sooner they get here, the better." Ross nodded. "We've already sent the signal, but I'll double-check the systems. Maybe we can boost the transmission strength." Meanwhile, Captain Winters turned her attention back to the medical base. The crew had been working nonstop to treat the injured, but the numbers were growing. Too many were too badly hurt, and the medical team was stretched thin. The emotional weight of the attack was starting to settle in on everyone. They were no longer healers. They were survivors, and they would do whatever it took to make sure this attack didn't go unpunished. Out in the darkness of space, the attackers were watching, waiting for the Aetheris to fall. But they had no idea what was coming for them. Back at Earth's military command, the distress signal from the Aetheris had finally reached the right ears. Admiral Jonah Carter, commander of Earth's war fleet, was sitting at his desk when the message arrived. At first, he had thought it was just another routine communication from one of Earth's outposts. But when he saw the urgency in the message and the distress coming through, his eyes widened in disbelief. "Captain, prepare the fleet," he ordered his second-in-command. "I want all ships ready to move out. Now." "The Aetheris?" "Under attack," the officer asked, astonished. "Prepare the fleet," Admiral Carter repeated, his voice cold. "This isn't just an attack. This is a declaration of war." Earth had been pushed too far, and now the full might of Earth's war fleet was going to make sure the attackers understood one thing: you do not threaten humanity without facing the consequences. The time for peace was over, and a new war had begun. The first rays of dawn had barely reached Earth's atmosphere when the orders were given. Admiral Jonah Carter, standing on the command bridge of the flagship Vigilance, stared at the glowing stars outside the vast windows. The weight of the moment was not lost on him. The Aetheris had been attacked, and that was not something Earth would let go unanswered. His heart was heavy with the knowledge that humanity's peaceful reputation had been shattered in an instant. But his resolve was solid. He had seen the strength of the Earth's fleet firsthand. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever known. The ships were equipped with technology centuries ahead of their time, developed through humanity's relentless ingenuity. And now, those ships were being called upon to defend their own. "Admiral, the fleet is assembling," Commander Ramirez reported, his voice steady, but with a hint of urgency. "We'll be ready for launch in 2 hours." Carter turned to face him. "We're going after them," he said, his voice low and determined. "This isn't just a rescue mission for the Aetheris. We're sending a message. The galaxy may have thought it could cast humanity aside, but they're about to learn how wrong they were." Ramirez nodded, fully understanding the gravity of the situation. "The Aetheris is still transmitting a weak signal. They're in serious trouble out there, sir." "Keep tracking them," Carter ordered. "I don't want to lose them. Once we're in range, we make sure every enemy ship knows what happens when you attack a human vessel." For years, Earth had been content to remain on the sidelines of galactic politics. The fleet had been mostly a tool of defense, a sign of their resolve, but one they hadn't used much in recent decades. But the attack on the Aetheris had crossed a line Earth had always been willing to defend, even if that meant going to war. Carter looked down at the ship's navigation map. It was filled with the bright blue outlines of Earth's most formidable warships, all in sync, all preparing for the mission. The Vigilance was the fleet's pride, a behemoth of steel and energy, equipped with technology designed to defend Earth's interests at any cost. Outside the Vigilance, the rest of the fleet was getting ready. Destroyers, dreadnoughts, and cruisers all lined up in perfect formation. The sheer scale of it was terrifying. Humanity's enemies had no idea what they were about to face. Meanwhile, on the Aetheris, Captain Winters was still overseeing the repairs. The attack had left deep scars on the hospital ship, and it wasn't certain how much longer they could keep it operational. The crew worked tirelessly, knowing that Earth's fleet was on its way, but every moment felt like a countdown. They didn't know how long they could hold off their attackers, but they had to survive long enough to see the fleet arrive. "We need more time," Winters said, pacing the bridge, her fists clenched as the memories of the attack replayed in her mind. The enemy had been relentless, showing no mercy. They had known exactly where to strike, and the Atheris' weak defenses had crumpled under the pressure. "We're barely holding together here, Captain," said Lieutenant Ross, his voice strained as he worked at one of the consoles. "The outer hull is breached in several places. The medical bays are functioning, but just barely. The power grid is failing." "I know," Winters replied, her voice tight with frustration. "But we have to hold on. Earth is coming for us. We just need to survive long enough." The tension was palpable. Every officer on the bridge, every crew member working below deck, knew what was at stake. The Atheris wasn't just any ship. It was a symbol of Earth's compassion and dedication to peace. And now, with humanity's strength on the line, the entire galaxy would know what it meant to attack a human ship. As the Vigilance and the rest of Earth's fleet prepared to leave orbit, Carter stood tall at the command center. His expression was resolute, his eyes filled with a fierce determination. This wasn't just about rescuing the Atheris anymore. This was about sending a message that would echo through the stars for centuries to come. "I want full battle readiness," Carter ordered, his voice sharp. "We're going to give the galaxy a reason to remember what happens when they mess with Earth." "Aye, Admiral," came the chorus of responses from his crew. The sound of command being obeyed filled the bridge with a sense of purpose and power. Carter turned back to the view screen, watching as the fleet's ships activated their engines. The entire fleet, each vessel a powerful symbol of Earth's military might, moved into formation. It was time to leave. Time to show the galaxy just how deadly humanity could be when provoked. And then, Carter made a decision that would set the tone for the coming battle. "Let the fleet know. We will make a full assault," he said. "This will be our declaration of war." The ships turned, their engines glowing brightly as they moved into the vast unknown, toward the Atheris and the attackers who had dared to strike Earth's people. The fleet was moving out, and they were not going to stop until justice had been served. The galaxy would learn a hard lesson that day. Humanity was no longer just a peaceful species. They had been pushed too far, and now they were coming for revenge. The battle for the stars had just begun. "You said." As Earth's fleet surged toward the coordinates of the Atheris, the stars outside the command bridge of the Vigilance streaked by like brilliant streaks of light. The massive warship led the charge, flanked by destroyers and cruisers, their weapons powered up and their shields fully charged. Every captain, every officer aboard these ships knew the gravity of the moment. They were not just embarking on a rescue mission. They were about to teach the galaxy a lesson about the power of humanity. Admiral Carter stood at the helm, his mind racing through every possible outcome. They were approaching the coordinates where the Atheris had last sent a distress signal. The attackers, an unknown alien faction, had taken their best shot, but now they were going to feel the full wrath of Earth's might. "Admiral, we're entering the target zone," reported Commander Ramirez, his fingers flying across the control panel. His voice was calm, but there was a tension in the air. The attack had been swift, and there was no telling how many ships these attackers had. But Carter had no doubt that Earth's fleet could crush them. "Good. Prepare for any surprises," Carter said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Keep an eye on our rear. I don't want anyone sneaking up on us." Suddenly, a sharp beep sounded on the console. Ramirez turned to face the Admiral, his expression growing serious. "We've detected multiple ships ahead, Admiral. They're not human, and they're heavily armed," Ramirez reported, scanning the holographic display that had just lit up on the command center screen. The unknown ships were closing in on the Atheris, their dark shapes ominous against the backdrop of the stars. There was no mistake. These were the attackers. "Are they in range?" Carter asked, his voice cold and controlled. "They are," Ramirez answered, glancing at the radar. "We've got enough distance to strike first." Carter didn't hesitate. Target their lead ship. Full power to the weapons. Take them down before they know what hit them. The bridge shook slightly as the Vigilance's massive cannons hummed to life. Powerful energy blasts were fired toward the enemy ships. The lead attacker, a large warship, was caught by surprise as it was hit by the first wave of blasts. It shuddered, sparks flying from its hull, but it didn't go down immediately. The rest of the fleet followed suit, unleashing their weapons, each ship opening fire in a coordinated attack. "Sir, they're returning fire," Lieutenant Foster shouted. "Their ships are armed with heavy laser cannons and missile launchers." The air on the command deck grew heavy with the sound of weapons discharging, their powerful blasts lighting up the darkness of space. Carter's eyes remained fixed on the screen, his face impassive. This was war, and there was no turning back. The enemy ships retaliated, launching a volley of missiles that streaked toward the Vigilance. The shields flared with energy as the missiles collided with the protective barrier, causing ripples of force to run across the hull. The ship shook under the impact, but the shields held strong. "Return fire," Carter barked, his eyes narrowing. He could feel the anger building in his chest. They had attacked a human hospital ship, and now they were going to pay for it. The Vigilance's cannons fired again, this time with even more intensity. The beams of energy cut through the darkness, striking their targets with pinpoint precision. The enemy ships began to falter, their shields buckling under the force of the blasts. One by one, they were being torn apart. On the Aetherus, Captain Winters watched the battle unfold from her ship's emergency communications array. Her crew was working tirelessly to keep the ship operational, but she knew they were running out of time. The attackers had taken heavy damage, but they hadn't given up yet. She could still hear the sounds of the battle echoing in the distance. "Captain, we've got incoming transmissions from the Vigilance," said Lieutenant Ross, his voice filled with relief. "The fleet's here. They're tearing through the enemy forces." Winter's eyes glistened with a mixture of gratitude and determination. "Get the signal to the crew. We're not out of this yet. We need to keep the Aetherus operational for just a little longer. We've survived the worst of it." Despite the damage, the Aetherus held strong, and the incoming support from Earth's fleet gave her new hope. The Vigilance and the rest of the ships in the fleet pushed forward, not giving the enemy a moment to regroup. Back on the command bridge of the Vigilance, Carter's voice was steady as he ordered the final strike. "Give them everything we've got. Make sure they don't get away." The fleet intensified its assault, and the tide of the battle began to shift. The enemy ships, battered and on the brink of collapse, attempted to retreat. But Earth's fleet wasn't about to let them escape. A final barrage of energy blasts shredded their ships, leaving nothing but debris behind. The once proud fleet of attackers was now nothing more than wreckage scattered across the void of space. As the final enemy ship exploded in a flash of light, Carter allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. But he knew this was just the beginning. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. "Admiral, the Aetherus is safe. The enemy is defeated," Ramirez said, his voice filled with respect. Carter looked out the window, his gaze settling on the wreckage of the enemy fleet. Humanity isn't a target. We're a force to be reckoned with. The battle was over, but the message had been sent. The victory over the alien fleet was just the beginning, but for humanity, it was a clear message to the galaxy. Earth had been shunned, attacked, and underestimated, but now humanity stood tall. The enemy ships lay in ruins, drifting helplessly in the void of space, and in the heart of that cosmic battlefield, the Vigilance remained a beacon of strength and resolve. Admiral Carter stood before the strategic map on the command bridge, his eyes scanning the vast expanse of space. The lights of the stars twinkled far beyond, but there was no joy in his heart. He knew the war was far from over. Their victory was only temporary. The attackers would not give up so easily. There would be retaliation. But Carter was ready. He had the power of Earth's fleet behind him. "Admiral," Commander Ramirez spoke, breaking the silence, We've analyzed the wreckage. There's no sign of their flagship. We believe it retreated before the final attack." Carter's eyes narrowed. "So they run, like the cowards they are," he muttered under his breath. But even as he spoke, he knew this retreat was a tactic, a means of regrouping for a more devastating strike. Humanity's enemies were not foolish. They knew the price of underestimating Earth's power. "We need to track them down," Carter said, his voice firm. "We cannot let them escape. Send out every scout ship we have. I want eyes on every corner of this galaxy if necessary." Ramirez nodded, immediately relaying the orders. The crew worked quickly, every officer pulling up data on the unknown enemy, trying to piece together their strategy. They had already learned one valuable lesson. The aliens were not just fighters. They were strategic planners. They would hide, regroup, and then strike again when the time was right. Meanwhile, on the Etheris, Captain Winters was deep in thought. She was grateful for the rescue, but something didn't sit right with her. The attackers hadn't just come for the hospital ship. Their assault had been deliberate, calculated, and far too precise. There was something more to this attack than met the eye. "Lieutenant Ross," she called, her voice tense. "Are there any traces of a second fleet? Any signs of backup?" Ross checked the readings quickly. "There's nothing, Captain. It's strange. They came in with full force, but then, nothing. No reinforcements, no backup signals." Captain Winters paced, thinking hard. "It doesn't make sense. They came in too strong for a single attack. They must have something else in play. I want you to continue monitoring the channels. If they're regrouping, we need to know where." Just as she finished speaking, a young officer burst into the room, his face pale. "Captain, we've got a problem. A massive warship has just appeared on the sensors. It's not from our fleet." Winters froze. Her worst fears were beginning to take shape. The retreating aliens had not run. They had gone to bring in their reinforcements, and now Earth was facing something much worse than before. It was not just about a single attack. This was about a new threat, one that was going to test humanity in ways they hadn't yet prepared for. "Get me Admiral Carter." "Now," Winters ordered. Back on the Vigilance, Carter's eyes snapped to attention when the transmission came through from the Etheris. Winters appeared on the screen, looking more serious than ever. "Admiral, we've detected a massive alien warship. It's heading straight for us. We think it's their flagship." Carter didn't hesitate. "We'll meet them head-on. Prepare for full battle readiness. All ships, get into formation. We're not letting them destroy our resolve." The tension in the air was palpable. All around the Vigilance, the crew moved in synchronized steps, knowing this next battle would be far more dangerous than the last. The enemy wasn't just another ragtag fleet. This was their last chance at survival, and Earth's war fleet was about to meet it head-on. The enemy flagship was now visible on the scanners. A massive, imposing vessel, darker than any ship Carter had seen before, appeared like a shadow in the endless black. It was a monstrosity of war, a vessel built for destruction. "Admiral, we're within range of their weapons," Ramirez reported, his voice tight. "Their shields are up. We can't take them down easily." Carter nodded, his jaw clenched. "They may have the firepower, but they don't have the will. Not like we do. Open fire. Give them everything we've got." The first round of fire erupted, massive energy beams flying toward the alien flagship. But this time, the enemy was ready. The alien ship retaliated with its own barrage of weapons, and the space between the ships filled with flashes of energy. The battle was now on, a true test of strength and determination. Carter's fleet fought with all their might, and the Vigilance led the charge, its guns blazing. The alien flagship, though powerful, was slower, and Earth's fleet used their agility to maneuver around it, striking in coordinated bursts. But the battle was far from easy. The alien ship's weapons were deadly, and it was clear the enemy had planned for a prolonged fight. This wasn't just about winning. It was about survival. In the heat of the conflict, Carter's thoughts went to Earth, to the people who had been forced to watch their planet be shunned, abandoned, and forgotten. They had no idea what was coming, but they were about to find out. Humanity was no longer powerless, and as Earth's fleet clashed with the alien forces, Carter knew one thing for certain. This was a war humanity would win. The battle raged on, filling the vast emptiness of space with flashes of energy and the roar of weaponry. The alien flagship was proving more resilient than anyone had expected, but it was not invincible. Humanity's fleet, led by the Vigilants, was proving their worth with every calculated strike. However, the longer the fight lasted, the clearer it became. This was a battle of endurance, and the aliens had no intention of backing down. Admiral Carter stood at the helm of his ship, his hands gripping the rail as he observed the carnage unfolding outside the observation windows. His mind raced with the knowledge that the aliens would not simply give up. They were too organized, too desperate. The enemy had a powerful vessel, but Earth's fleet had something they lacked: human determination. "Admiral," Ramirez's voice broke through Carter's thoughts. "We're taking heavy fire from their forward cannons. Shields are down to 40% and falling fast." Carter's eyes narrowed. "Not good enough. We can't afford to lose any more ground. We need to turn the tide." He turned to face the communications officer. "Send a message to the rest of the fleet. I want all ships to focus their fire on the enemy's shield generators. We'll disable their defenses before we finish this." The crew responded instantly, relaying the order. Across the battlefield, the Earth fleet adjusted, shifting their focus to the weak points in the alien ship's defense. The ships danced around the alien flagship, dodging deadly blasts and using their superior agility to get in close for the strike. Each attack chipped away at the massive vessel's shields, but the alien flagship retaliated fiercely, unleashing devastating energy blasts that caused even the toughest human ships to shudder. The Vigilance took a direct hit, and the lights flickered for a moment. The ship groaned under the strain, but the crew held their positions, determined to carry on. Carter's voice remained steady, despite the chaos. "Status report. Shield integrity at 25%. Admiral," came the grim reply. "We're holding, but we can't take another direct hit." Carter took a deep breath. It was now or never. The battle was at a crucial point. If they didn't end the fight soon, they would lose everything. Then the unthinkable happened. A massive explosion erupted from the alien flagship, sending shockwaves throughout space. The Vigilance shook violently, and for a moment, it seemed as though the ship would be torn apart by the sheer force. But as the smoke cleared, Carter saw something unexpected. The flagship's energy shields flickered and sparked before going completely dark. It was vulnerable. "Now," Carter shouted, his voice filled with urgency. At his command, the fleet launched their final barrage. Waves of laser blasts, plasma bolts, and missiles poured into the alien ship's exposed hull, hitting it from all sides. The flagship's core reactor began to overload, its structural integrity failing. For the first time in the battle, the aliens seemed to falter. The pride of their fleet was crumbling before them. But even as the alien vessel started to break apart, Carter knew this wasn't the end. The alien forces had far too many tricks left up their sleeves, and he could already feel the weight of what would come next. "Admiral," Commander Ramirez called, urgency in his voice. "We're receiving strange readings. There's a fleet of ships incoming. It's too many to count." Carter's heart sank. Are they reinforcements? Did they bring more ships? He knew the aliens wouldn't go down without a fight. But this was a final desperate attempt to regain their lost ground. On the radar, the incoming ships appeared, sleek and menacing. The ships were not like the ones they had fought before. They were faster, more agile, and far better equipped for a quick strike. "Prepare the fleet," Carter ordered, his voice hard as steel. "We may have won the first round, but we're not done yet." As the first wave of alien ships approached, Carter's fleet scrambled to prepare for the next phase of the battle. It was clear now that the aliens weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for domination. Their failure was not a defeat, but rather a call to arms. They had thrown everything they had at Earth, but now they would return with more. In the command room of the Atheris, Captain Winters looked to her crew, determination in her eyes. "This is our time to end this war, once and for all. We've come too far to back down now." With the alien reinforcements bearing down on them, the human fleet braced itself. The galaxy had underestimated Earth once, but this time, humanity was ready to show the aliens what it truly meant to face the wrath of a species that had been pushed too far. And as the battle intensified, Carter knew the galaxy would never be the same. Earth's war fleet had been tested, but they were stronger than anyone had anticipated. The stars themselves seemed to tremble as the human fleet prepared for the final showdown, one that would define the future of the galaxy. The hunt for the alien forces had just begun, and this time, humanity would not be denied. The atmosphere inside the command deck of the Vigilance was tense. Outside, the stars had become a swirling battlefield as humanity's fleet faced down the incoming wave of alien ships. The enemy reinforcements were massive, too many for their numbers to easily overcome. But Earth's fleet had learned from their previous fights. They had adapted, and now they had something the aliens lacked: a hunger for victory. Admiral Carter stood firm in front of the large holographic display that flickered with tactical information. He could see the enemy ships approaching. They were sleek, dark, and ominous, an army of warships that could spell the end of humanity's resistance if they weren't stopped. But Carter wasn't afraid. His crew wasn't afraid. And most importantly, humanity wasn't afraid. "Admiral, their fleet is approaching fast," reported Lieutenant Simmons, his voice laced with urgency. "We'll be in range of their weapons in less than 5 minutes." Carter nodded grimly. "Then we don't have 5 minutes to waste. Prepare the fleet for final engagement. Focus on their command ships first and take out their heavy artillery. We've come this far. We're not going to lose now." With that, the final phase of the battle began. Human ships scattered, moving into formation as they targeted the heart of the enemy fleet. The alien ships retaliated quickly, launching energy beams and missiles that tore through space. The Vigilance dodged and weaved, expertly avoiding the blasts. It was no longer a battle of surprise. It was a battle of tactics, of skill, and of willpower. Outside the Vigilance, the space between the two fleets became a war zone. Alien ships fired relentlessly, their blasts lighting up the dark expanse of space. Human ships retaliated with a fierce barrage of their own, their weapons striking with pinpoint accuracy. It was a contest of endurance, where every ship's fate rested on the edge of a razor-sharp blade. As the battle raged on, Carter watched from his station. His mind calculated every move, every attack. But there was something more in his eyes, a fire that had been stoked by humanity's determination to survive. Earth had been cast out, rejected by the Galactic Council. But this was their chance to prove they belonged. They would not go quietly into the night. They would burn brightly, and their flames would light the path for every future conflict in the stars. "Status update," Carter barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We've disabled 3 of their command ships, Admiral." Lieutenant Simmons shouted, his fingers flying over the controls. "The rest of their fleet is trying to regroup, but they're struggling to keep up with our speed. We're making a dent in their lines." Carter allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, but only a moment. He knew the true test was yet to come. The alien fleet, although damaged, still had more power than anything humanity had faced before. This was their final stand. It was do or die. And then the unimaginable happened. From the far side of the battlefield, a massive alien ship emerged, its hull glowing with an eerie light. It was unlike any ship the humans had ever seen. It was larger, more formidable, and exuded an aura of sheer power. Carter's eyes widened as he saw it. "Admiral, that ship, it's massive." Commander Ramirez exclaimed. "That's their flagship. If we don't stop it now, we're finished." Carter's gaze hardened. The battle had been difficult up to this point, but now it was make or break. He wasn't about to let all their hard work go to waste. Humanity would not back down. "Set course for the flagship. All ships, follow my lead," Carter ordered, his voice resolute. "We end this now." The fleet surged forward, forming a tight battle group as they made their way toward the alien flagship. But the alien ship retaliated, unleashing an explosive barrage of energy blasts that lit up the space around them. Ships exploded in flashes of light as they were torn apart by the sheer power of the alien weaponry. But the humans pushed forward, their will stronger than ever. "Fire at will," Carter commanded, his voice unwavering as he stared into the chaos unfolding before him. The human fleet began to concentrate their fire on the alien flagship, their weapons pounding against the alien ship's shields. The alien ship retaliated with blasts of its own, but the human fleet's superior tactics kept them in the fight. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to prove that humanity belonged in the stars, that they were more than just survivors. They were conquerors. The Vigilance raced forward, leading the charge. With a final, devastating strike, humanity's fleet managed to pierce the flagship's shields and deliver a crushing blow to its core. The massive ship groaned, its engines sputtering and dying as it began to break apart. Explosions ripped through its hull, and the once imposing flagship began to crumble. "We've done it," Lieutenant Simmons cried, his voice filled with disbelief and awe. "The flagship's gone." But Carter knew it wasn't over yet. The alien forces were far from finished. There was still chaos in the stars, still the need for a final push to ensure humanity's victory. As the alien fleet began to retreat, their flagship destroyed, the humans did not hesitate. They pressed their advantage, attacking the remaining ships with everything they had. The tide had turned, and there was no going back now. The battle was won. Earth had defended itself. The aliens had underestimated humanity. And now they would pay the price. As the alien forces retreated into the darkness of space, Earth's war fleet remained, victorious and unbroken. Admiral Carter stood, watching the last of the alien ships vanish into the distance. The stars had not only witnessed humanity's strength, they had felt it. And the galaxy would never forget the day when Earth's war fleet proved that no one could stand against them. Humanity had been rejected, but now they stood tall. And the galaxy, for the first time, knew fear.